So I'm here with Dr. Luis de Miranda to talk about the philosophical consultation. So first of all, can you tell us what is a philosophical consultation according to you?
It is a very privileged moment in space-time where two people usually meet to discuss their presence on this strange planet in terms of sense-making, in terms of wonder, curiosity, and the understanding that should come with our actions. So one is the counselor, usually trained with many hours of this kinds of dialogue, sometimes with a method, like me. One is the counselee, and this is not a context in which we're looking for, diagnosis, symptoms, but rather embracing the fact that we are earthly beings in a condition that is constantly evolving and that we can co-create. So I will end this long definition by saying it's also a political act in the noble philosophical sense that has been deployed since Plato. That is ultimately, and that's the difference between philosophy and religion. Philosophy believes we can approach paradise on earth. So that's sacred space-time, that simple room between two people and their conversation is a place to actualize, bring us closer to paradise on earth.
And you mentioned that there is no diagnosis here. So would you say that would be a difference between philosophical counseling and other things like psychotherapy or other therapies?
Absolutely. I have a training in psychoanalysis, Lacanian psychoanalysis, and I never really wanted to practice because, I have a deep interest and respect for cognitive sciences and some psychological approaches, which I think should enter in dialogue with the philosophical health approach. But I noticed that in practice, psychotherapists that are working under a very established umbrella, they end up applying sort of greeds that are a priori, and they might thereby forget to just simply welcome the form of life that the person brings with them. So it's very important to have no judgment a priori, and thereby not to try to apply an analytic framing on what the person might have. It happens very often in my counseling that the person is at the same time seeing a psychiatrist or a psychologist, or has been. And it's not so rare that I hear the sentence, "I've seen many psychotherapists, nothing worked. You're my last hope," which is the responsibility of the philosopher. So I think there is a space for people who realize that this life is strange, it's sometimes difficult. Our human condition calls for constant questioning, redefinition, and new perspectives. And that is not only natural, but actually healthy. So a lot in our society that gets labeled as a mental health issue is actually just being a conscious human applying the capacity for wonder and questioning in a world that in the last decades tends to be rather anti-intellectual.
So then would you say the philosophical consultation is for everyone? And not just
Absolutely.
some problems or issues or.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So, in my experience, because I have now 8 years of experience of regular counseling and hundreds of people, I would say that there is a pretty distributed proportion between people who simply feel that they want to have a better sense of their life, a better understanding of what their highest destiny could be, sense of purpose, worldview. And it's not that from a general standard anything is particularly wrong in their life, but they feel that there could be more awareness, more bliss, more understanding, and perhaps a better alignment between their actions and their thoughts. But on the second hand, there are also people who come with a specific problem. In some cases, quite a difficult one. I've had people with suicidal tendencies. I've had people who felt like social ghosts. And the method I apply has been successful with both sides because ultimately, what often happens is that we tell ourselves stories about uh, something that might be wrong about us, and very often it's just a matter of redefinition, understanding, and also a different perspective that brings new ways of doing, behaving. And so, while I'm not negating here that some people might need clinical help, and I'm actually trained to recognize that.
So
In many cases, it's much less than we would think. So I would say that the mental health issue is actually a philosophical health issue in many cases.
so you deal with these people as well. If
Absolutely.
you have some mental issues, you don't transfer them to some
No,
psychology.
no. I mean, in some cases, I've had, for example, in cases of suicidal ideation, the people are usually seeing also a psychiatrist, right? And I think the only obstacle, for example, for a good philosophical counseling session would be that the person is heavily sedated, right, to the point that they can hardly speak. So there is a minima of um, conditions for good dialogue to deploy. One thing I think it's important to mention is that one does not need to be a philosopher to engage in a good philosophical consultation process. And here, this is why I've deployed the small pH method, the sense-making interviews, looking at elements of philosophical health, such that people are gently brought to more, let's say, overarching matters like the sense of purpose through a gentle process that starts with a bodily sense, then the sense of self, the sense of belonging, etc. It's a 6-step process to avoid the fact that might sometimes, let's say, be a hinder to people who might say, "Oh, maybe this is not for me to try." Is that they think the philosopher is going to bring them on top of Mount Everest with a helicopter, and then they will be hardly able to breathe. So, yes, we unveil someone's philosophy of life, but I think through a slow, gentle process that starts with our embodiment and presence in the world.
There needs to be some minimal ability of rational thinking to engage in this type of dialogue.
That's a good question. So I would say yes and no. So for me, philosophizing is not only a rational process, it's also a creative process, right? So we've seen in the last decades that it's possible to do philosophy with children, for example, right? But let's be generous and have a sort of a large definition of what rational means, right? Sense making, right? So of course it's not about Hegelian logic, but it is some sort of ordering of ideas. But in fact, the very work of, I think, philosophical counseling and philosophical health is also to help the person get better at that, get better at seeing ideas that contradict themselves, get better at understanding also that despite the ideology of fun that is predominant in our world, actually everyone is governed by ideologies. Everyone is governed by values and thoughts, even when they're not aware of that. So I would say that humans are more rational than they think they are. Your question was important also because we might say, okay, so what about people with a very low IQ or people who have some sort of cognitive hinder? I would say that, of course, if you have a label philosophical counselor, this will attract a certain kind of people, right? I would say that 20% of the human population that is more of the intellectual type. By that, I mean some people who process reality already, not so emotionally, but through idea. However, I think that it would be interesting to, as in the case of children, to define with which strategies can be approached to gently make sense of things. That's why, for example, in the first session of the Smart PH method, after the introductory session, we talk about the body. And so I would ask you, what's your relationship with your body? What comes to your mind when you think about your body? This, I think, is a conversation that can be started with many, many people and of all ages. I think in P4C, philosophy for children, that approach, they start at the age of 5 or 6.
Yeah. So what is the objective then of this consultation? Is there, some result that you want to achieve, or what? Why would someone come to you? Why would you want to be consulted?
Absolutely. So beyond the idea of perfectionism, right? That because we are in a world where we need to produce results. So just the fact of stepping back and thinking, well, not everything needs to be seen in productivity terms. That's also philosophical. Having said that, I think that what I offer in my consultations is not only to help people be more aware of the values, ideas, worldviews that they already been acting by unconsciously or more or less consciously. So more clarity about the reasons for their own action. And then also therefore better alignment between purpose, worldview, practices of the self, such that in fact, what we often observe is that people become more engaged in life, more joyful, more coherent, and uh, the result is actually, which is might seem almost contradictory because people see philosophy as this sort of a very complicated luggage books and that would make them more heavy. In fact, there's an alleviation because there are a lot of things that we engage in life that, in fact, are just noise, and we do it because we're not really aware that this is not who we are. This is not good for us, and not even pertinent. So those are the kind of benefits that people have, um, knowing that um, it's interesting to see that, let's say that to echo your previous question, someone might come with a very specific, difficult question, right? Like if someone says, this is a real example, but someone might say, and of course, this is completely anonymous, but I'm 32, I never had a relationship. I feel like people see me as a ghost. That's a real existential problem, right? And I remember this was a very successful series of sessions. The SMILE method is 8 sessions. So some people might say, oh, only 8 sessions. Yes. It's not also like in some psychoanalytic processes. It's not a conversation that lasts 4 years. I have very good results in just 8 sessions because of the structure of the method. And so in some cases, people really get out of a very heavy existential prison.
Yeah. To this, let's call it reasoning about yourself, talking about yourself, understanding yourself. It can be liberating then. Also from a philosophical.
The self, yes, absolutely. The self in the world also, right? So it's not just self-development. It's also, I think, I often insist on that, is that philosophical health, it's also a form of planetary thinking, where the Leibnizian concept of compossibility is very useful. I use it in my approach. So compossibility is not just thinking about what is possible, but what is possible together in a harmonious world. So absolutely, it's both the better clarity and power of the self in the Spinozan sense of power to deploy actions in the world that reflect our soul, to use a very dated word intentionally.
So this would be the philosophical health, the concept you're using.
That and the alignment between actions and thoughts. The idea that theory and practice are actually intertwined, should be intertwined in a same process. So philosophical health sees theory as practice, practice as theory, in a way by which our worldviews, actions, values are aligned and towards unity. And of course, we're not talking here about perfection, right? I think perfection often breaks what it's trying to achieve, but we're talking here about an asymptotic approach, whereby we get closer to what I call eudaimonia. So if you ask me what's the goal, so Aristotle said eudaimonia, which means literally not flourishing, but good relationship with your inner spirit. I talk about eudaimonia. Not that I don't think eudaimonia is good, but before eudaimonia, we need eudaimonia, which is a good relationship with our sense of the possible, with our domain of possibility. So that in itself is extremely liberating.
Yeah. And then you have your method. You mentioned it a couple of times, the SMILE method. Can you just run us through it quickly, the different steps, what happens when we have a consultation with you? You mentioned
Absolutely.
8 different sessions, I think.
Yes. So it's 8 sessions of 45 minutes. There is an introductory session where I get to know you better, where you think you are at this moment of your life, why you here, how you see your situation, the world. It's really a first exploration of the terrain. Then there are the 6 elements of philosophical health, and in that particular order, which is first the bodily sense, your relationship with your body, how you perceive your body, both as an outer phenomenon, but also inner phenomenon. And then we move to another session, the third session, on the sense of self. Again, very phenomenological. It's not a lecture, right? It's not, this is how you should think about the self. It's really a dialogue. So it's, in that sense, it's semi-structured. There is a structure, but within each session, we really follow the person's narrative, and so there's a lot of deep listening involved, but also progressively some intervention, right? So after the sense of self comes the sense of belonging, our relationship not only with all sorts of groups, but also belonging can be more abstract, belonging to ideas, belonging to nature, for example. The next sense is the sense of the possible we were talking about a few minutes ago. So what's our relationship with potential? This is very important. Actually, this is how I define health in itself. And I think it's important to say that I developed the SMILE method while doing interviews and philosophical dialogue with people living with spinal cord injury here in Sweden. So all 95% paralyzed, living with wheelchairs. But this was a population that I selected because they were perceived and they perceive themselves as having a good life 20 years or so after their trauma. So the question is the scientific question was there a philosophical health reason why they were able to develop a good life despite their condition, with their condition. And so they all had a very high sense of the possible. And this is a good way to discuss the difference between psychological health and philosophical health, because from a psychological perspective, most doctors told them this is denial. You're exaggerate your sense that everything is possible must be denial. Look at you, you're 95% paralyzed. But that's not the possible of psychology. That's not the possible of this kind of causal and physical behavior. It's a philosophical possible by which we reframe the conditions of possibility of our life at a very fundamental level. After the sense of the possible, and I would say that up to now, we share all these senses with all living beings, I think. A tree has a sense of the possible. If you put an obstacle, it will feel that it can go around. My cat, I don't have a cat, but I had cats, has a sense of self in a way, etc. But now, after the sense of the possible, we make this big, I would say, human jump to the sense of purpose. And what is interesting is that many people would say, and that's why often they come in philosophical conversations, they don't have really a purpose in life. Everything is okay, but they don't have a purpose. Right? So they want to find a higher purpose, something that gives them a deep orientation. And I have tools also within this session. I have developed some tools to help people architecture these sessions, especially when we reach the sense of purpose. And then the last sense, which is the philosophical sense. And by philosophical sense, I mean a combination of personal cosmology, worldview. Cosmology is a word that lost its appeal in the last centuries. But it's simply this idea that even if we're not aware of it, we understand, we have an explanation for why the universe is how it is. And it can be unconscious. A lot of people, for example, they might come to sessions and they might have this typical humanistic approach and say, we should be equal, we should have humanistic societies, etc. But if you scratch the surface, they would have this very neo-Darwinian ideology by which It's you're either eaten or you eat, or you're killed or get killed, right? And so it's unveiling that and helping people also develop perhaps a more idealistic worldview that still nevertheless resonates, I mean, with their fundamental values or beliefs. And then we end with the eighth session, which is a conclusion by which we observe the alignment of all these senses, but also the strategies, the existential strategies to unfold. What do we do with this? Basically, what are the new objectives, ambitions, intentions that we can deploy in the world?
Mm. And I asked you, as I ask everyone I'm talking to, if you were willing to do a 15-minute session with me just to show what it looks like, but you said it wouldn't really give a fair view of your method since it's based on these 6 steps, 8 different sessions.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm very happy if you want to have a short conversation, but with this caveat that let's imagine, well, then it would be perhaps the sort of a moment in the introductory session, right? But it won't give an idea of what happens to these 8 sessions, where very often people have epiphanies around session 6, 7, or 8. Having said that, again, I don't want to shy away from your proposal. If you wish, we can do it. It's up to you.
But I know you also have a YouTube channel where I see you put some sessions as well, so it's possible to go there and watch.
Absolutely. So that's probably the best idea is that there is on my channel a full cycle of the sessions with Jonathan Carroll, who is one of the certified Smart PH counselors. And people can just go there and there's a session on the body, a session on self. They will have an idea of how it deploys and how it manifests with someone. And of course, every person is different, right? So that's the beauty of it. It's that I think it's a good way to conclude is that we want to respect the singularity of the person, and I very much welcome, and I'm always surprised and welcoming of different forms of life if they exist. Having said that, it's also true that, and that's actually quite beautiful. The more I conduct sessions all over the world, the more I realize they are universals. They are very much commonalities between what we aspire to, and whether we are in Sweden and living more or less comfortably compared to other regions of the world, or whether we are, a student in India, or a mother struggling to travel 8 hours a day, which is one of the people I'm training at the moment. So there, I think philosophical health is a movement, and philosophical counseling and the idea that philosophy can help us have better lives. This is an idea that's spreading all over the world across social classes, and that is highly needed today in the world where all sorts of cogito pathologies are unfolding.
Yeah,
For example, with the use of AIs.
yeah. And you mentioned the political aspect of it, and would that be part of, like you said, we are pathologizing lots of things that are just normal existential issues that we have, and we are diagnosing people and medicating and whatever. So would that be part of
Absolutely.
the political aspect of it?
Yes, I think the political aspect, in the noble sense of what is a good life for a citizenship of ideally a world citizenship, right? Because we are in a global world that is very chaotic, where ideological conflicts are continuing to create real devastation. So I see philosophical health as a proposal to democratize what is, in my view, almost a human mutation. Philosophy is a very recent mutation, and therefore we don't see that it is something that probably, if we nurture it, can help all of humanity. At the moment, we could say, okay, it's a minority, maybe 20% who have access to that metacognitive approach. If you look at, and this is where politics are connected with other aspects that are very interesting for me too. For example, neuroscience. Right? We know that many theories in neuroscience explain that we have this sort of a dopamine seeking system that is really at the core, and then other emotions, other drives might develop from it. Well, if at the core of our way of being, our brain, and that we have in common with other forms of life, is this seeking phenomenon, we can imagine, and I think there will be research on that in the future, that what philosophical counseling does is it helps people elevate and work on that seeking system to perhaps elevate it to more metacognitive dimensions. If that is done, and if de facto that is the core of how our brain functions, then as a consequence, all other secondary drives like anger, aggressivity, etc., will be mitigated and will be less strong. So I think we will see in the future is, as you can see, I'm very optimistic and idealistic about it. I think that a systematic and collective practice of philosophical health could not only improve our democracy, but also really continue this journey by which, I think it's a double journey by which we take responsibility for our stewardship of the earth, and at the same time we embrace our relationship, close relationship with other forms of life.
Yeah. So a philosophical and democratic project. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So anything else you would like to add? Anything you would like to add before we stop?
It was lovely talking to you, and I think there's a lot to unpack, right? We are here approaching things. Perhaps where we could add is the following. There's nothing that can replace a personal journey of philosophical counseling. And when I started offering this consultation, I didn't think I would be good. I actually doubted it because philosophers are not always the most, let's say, friendly type, or people who have the most social empathy or social skill. But I discovered very quick that people were delighted. People felt that this was really transformative, and it continued to be so. And I think that's because there's something called intellectual empathy that people need as much as emotional empathy. And so for me, it has been a beautiful continuation of my conviction since I studied philosophy in my early 20s at the university, that philosophy can help us change the world.
And connect with other people.
In the same world, absolutely.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks. All right. Good.
Right. I think it's still recording, but it was lovely talking to you.